TeenSpeak. Empowering today's youth. The purpose of TeenSpeak is to allow teens a safe space to share stories and strategies around challenges and inspire other teens on how to meet their own challenges or make their mark in our world. Some of our guests may have done some inspiring things that may not resonate with everyone's views, be it personal or political. This is not a political podcast, and though we have our own personal views, our guests do not necessarily reflect our views. They are simply here to share a story and experience in hopes it inspires others to be the best version of themselves and make the impact they desire in the world.
Welcome to TeenSpeak, empowering today's youth. I am Coach T, and I'm here with my sidekick and best bud, Keith Senzer, and we're excited to have you here in this episode. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-host and let him tell you who we have on the show today.
Thanks. Great to see you, Coach T. So exciting. This is our first actual guest episode. If you heard our first episode, you got to just hear us talking a little bit about what we're going to be doing and the plan for this podcast. But today we actually have a first guest, and her name's Ashley. Ashley is an amazing young lady. I run the Sofia Valsamos Foundation, which I've spoken about, and Ashley has been serving on the junior board of the foundation for a couple of years now. She's currently the vice president of the foundation. She has her own podcast called Teen Talk, which I was a guest on a couple of times. And Ashley has so much knowledge to share and has been through so much. But really today, what we want to focus on is her experience in middle school and high school with bullying. She dealt with a lot of bullying. It had a lot of impact. She had some traumatic things that happened in her life, and she's really managed to pull through it. And she's really just an incredible young woman. She's now a freshman in college, doing great. And despite all of these challenges and dealing with the bullying and how upsetting that can be, she found her space, she found her tribe, and she's great. And I'm really excited to have her on here. So Ashley, welcome.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you, I know that we want to talk about the bullying and really how you managed to deal with that and handle it and the strategies you used to move through some of those scenarios. But I also know you had a lot happen, like with your dad and everything. So maybe just give us a little introduction into like who you are. You could definitely talk about your podcast and why you do it, and share a little bit about your story, like what it was like, what the bullying felt like, why it happened, and we're going to pepper you with questions and talk about it and share some strategies and nuggets so you can support other teens who are listening to this and might be struggling with the same thing.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest of many. I'm sure this is going to be a huge hit. But hi, I'm Ashley. As Keith said, I'm currently a freshman in college at Hofstra University studying pre-med. And, we can talk more about that later with my podcast, Teen Talk. The show is mainly created sort of like TeenSpeak, I would say, just to inspire other young people, to help people get through struggles of daily life and trauma, whatever they may be experiencing. So I interview people of all ages from all different walks of life. And as I went into college, I did do the closing episode of that show. So it is retired, but I am starting a new podcast, which is going to be something with a very similar message called Listen to Your Heart, which brings music into the fold a little bit more as far as the same kind of messaging with mental health awareness, anti-bullying, things like that. Music has been something I enjoyed my entire life. I was born with no vision in one of my eyes. So right off the bat, I had a disability when I was younger. And music was always my way of coping with the world, journaling, things like that, but definitely music. As far as my dad goes, I'll give the abridged version of the story just so we can get an idea. But he was diagnosed with cancer before I was born. And the kind he had is stage 4 angiosarcoma, which not a lot of people know of because it's actually the rarest cancer, or one of the rarest. So the statistic is literally 1 in a million for that. So that happened, right when I was born, and doctor said he would not have more than 6 months to live. So, obviously I don't remember that time being 1 month old, 2 month old, 3 month old, but I know that it took a toll on my family. But I will say that he was a miracle because he ended up living well past what the doctors had said was humanly possible. When I was 7, we moved to Arizona because, the chemotherapy was very expensive and such. that's kind of when I started feeling a bit like, I would say an outcast, because going into elementary school and not having any friends, not knowing anybody, that's really where it started. I was always a shy kid. My dad was sick. I was worried. I was anxious. My anxiety started there as well. He did break his back and become a paraplegic. So I began taking care of him. And that's where my passion for being a doctor came into play. And we ended up moving back here to New York a few years later. And sadly, when I was 11 years old, my father did pass, when I was in my first year of middle school. And things just kept going from there. The moving around, the bouncing around, the way the school districts were lined up. I was constantly being broken away from whatever friends I had and being put in a new environment. The bullying reached a peak in high school and 8th grade, that area. And I actually had to end up transferring schools for it because my anxiety got so bad with everything that had happened. But the bullying was definitely a contributing factor. But once I transferred schools, I would say, I started at the low, and I've just been hopefully climbing up my mountain ever since, and reaching the goals that I've set for myself that I was unable to achieve as the previous version of myself, where I was so anxious and shy and where I cared so much about what other people think of me. So I know that was a lot, but that's the rundown on me and how I got here.
If I could, I'm going to chime in here because a couple of things you said actually really resonated with me significantly. Growing up, I was in a military family. I lost my father to leukemia.
I'm sorry.
But also the moving around part. I have an older and younger brother, and I was the only one that had anxieties about the moving. I had the hardest time, making friends whenever we moved. And I think one of the things that's significantly different from when I was growing up versus you, how other people deal with your anxiety is different, with the way kids are now. I think that's the biggest thing that stood out to me hearing you share that part. And I can only imagine, with your father being ill, you being so young and understanding and giving, and doing as much as you can to family has to absolutely take a toll on you when you're outside the home. So really applaud your resiliency. Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Ashley, like when you talked about, do you remember, like I definitely want to talk about the bullying and what happened and what you were being bullied about and how it made you feel and how you managed to work through it. But before we go there, like, do you remember, like I know you kind of said you switched switched schools, but like, do you remember that pivotal moment, like when it clicked, when you were like, okay, like I know what I need to do now to not feel this way anymore? Like, and it's okay if you don't. I'm just curious.
I do. I think there were a couple. I think everyone has multiple. Some people may have one, but I definitely had multiple. I think in 8th grade, I had my friends. I had a group, and I would say the 8th grade was the best year from kindergarten through 8th, 100%, because I finally got out of my shell a little. I was doing morning announcements, and I was in the school show, and I was finally learning to accept who I was. But during the school show, we did Shrek, and I was cast as Fiona. And the day that the cast list came out, people were posting around social media saying that I didn't deserve the role and that I wasn't good enough for it. And from that moment on, it became my passion to kind of prove them wrong in that sense. But hearing people be so direct about it was definitely one of the turning points for me. And I think just, I was coming home in high school, 100%, I was coming home every day crying from just I almost want to say the toxic atmosphere that I kind of felt around me at the school I was at. Of course, there were nice people and nice teachers, but everything felt so mismatched and just chaotic. And the bullying was so badgering. So I was going home every day crying, and a lot in 8th grade as well. So within those panic attacks and those spells and the long talks with my mom and therapist after therapist, just talking about it, I realized that, yes, you're in control of your emotions, but there does come a breaking point. I get that in life we can't run. And I certainly don't, I wouldn't characterize myself as a person who runs away from issues and problems, but I wanted to surround myself with like-minded people who were on a different wavelength, more mature, more focused on academics, more focused on clubs, people who weren't going to parties and drinking and doing drugs and things. I wanted a group that was more like me. And I knew that if I let myself stay in that position in that high school, it wouldn't have been an enjoyable experience. So that's really when I knew. And it was terrifying because I was like, oh my gosh, it's another move. You know, I had so many previously. I was like, I really don't want to do this. I almost did it freshman year. I chickened out. So I let myself suffer through freshman year. And sophomore year, I said, that's it. I'm screwing it. I have to go do this because nothing can be harder than what I'm already going through, you know?
At any point, did you feel like, you mentioned therapists, but at any point, did you feel comfortable enough sharing with any of the teachers or faculty at the schools, or did you and not get any response?
I didn't share with teachers, and that's not something I think about too much. I would say that I spoke to mainly, you know, my mother was my rock, my whole thing, especially going through with what happened with my father. We were so close that whenever something happened, she was the first to know, and usually the only one to know, I will say. I will say that my teachers, if they saw it happening, they would take action, you know, so I don't blame them for being like bystanders. I would say that when it comes to the bullying, talking about like what actually happened, Keith, like what you were saying, kids nowadays have like, when it was younger, it was almost like you would come up to someone and just give them a direct blow and just say something. But nowadays it's this indirect kind of bullying that you almost can't get someone in trouble for. Like, you know, they're making you feel bad, but they're not doing anything that you can actually say, so-and-so said this to me, or so-and-so punched me in the face. Like, you can't say that. It's the rumors, it's indirect comments and glares being made and little comments being made to me. And the cyberbullying was a huge part of it. Things happening in group chats and social media behind locked passwords and doors that I couldn't get into online. And so it was hard to take it any further. I wouldn't say I was afraid to, it just never got to that place.
Talk about like the cyberbullying and things like that, right? Like I know one of the biggest things I've seen is like well, I know now Snapchat's the big one, but you know, a few years ago was Instagram, right? And you know, that whole subbing, right? Like where it's like, hey, we're gonna tag you on this, and we're not gonna name you, but we're gonna say, hey, you know, I hate when people do this type of thing, right? But they're directly talking to you, and you know they're talking to you, but you know they're right. So you know, like I know there's anxiety around this too, right? Because it kind of ties in. So maybe just share a little about like, because what I really want to eventually get to is strategies, right? Like what was your magic? Well, you know, what was your magic power to get through this, right? That you could share with other people listening, other teens listening. But like, talk about the anxiety a little bit, like being, you know, what it did to you, like when you heard this or you saw that or something took place, you know, it caused some sense of anxiety, and then how that anxiety impacted other parts of your life. And the reason I ask these questions is because like I know the answer, and I know we've probably discussed this before, but I want our audience to hear, because I'm sure there are so many kids out there that are being bullied still, have anxiety, feel exactly what you feel. And I think like when you can explain how the connection between the bullying and the anxiety merge and how it makes you feel, it'll help them understand, number one, not feel alone, understand, hey, I'm not the only one that's gone through this. So about strategies, they could see A plus B equals C, like, yes, this is how I felt and this is what I did, and now here I am. So
100%. I mean, well, first, like you said, I just want to say to anyone who's listening, you're 100% not alone. I would say, and this is not a statistic that I've looked up, so don't quote me, but I mean, well over like 75% of bullying, I would say, takes place online nowadays. That's people's platform to do it, because think of the courage that it takes to say something to someone's face. Unless you've got real guts, you're probably not going to. So the thing with social media is it's everywhere, for good and for bad. So people tend to hide behind a screen. If you're hidden behind a username and a phone number, no one can really humiliate you that way. I won't say you're protected, but you know what I mean. People think that they're safer to bully online. So, you know, and what you said with the post, it really does resonate with me, because there's a lot of times, as I said, you can't prove it's about you, but you know it's about you because there was something that came up and you just have a feeling, things like that. And something like that happened in my friend group about a year ago too, where someone was making posts about various friends in my group, and it got so bad that we almost had to take it to the school. So it does happen everywhere. And when it's online, it really is everywhere. So of course it caused anxiety for me. Seeing something come up on my page could easily trigger a panic attack within me. You know, I'm a very sensitive person, for better and for worse. And I don't know if that's nature or nurture. You know, growing up with so much going on, it could have definitely made me more sensitive. But I'm a very passionate person, and I take everything to heart that people say to me. And one comment can really trigger someone, anyone, including me. And I know for sure that it did. And certain comments can be very dangerous on social media. It can cause really, really dangerous and dark thoughts within somebody, and could lead to people, you know, taking their own lives. We hear the horror stories, and thank God I'm still here today to tell the tale. And I had people in my corner to support me. But it's so important to acknowledge. I would say that the comments on social media are almost worse than the ones in person, because in person you can stand up for yourself a little bit. But on social media, it's a very helpless feeling. It's very helpless. And to this day, I have a couple random people from my old school make jokingly rude comments on my posts. And every once in a while I get a prank call from this same number with this same crazy weird voice who won't leave me alone. And but I've learned to let it roll off my shoulders. But it's definitely a serious thing. And you're right, Keith, it can cause a lot of anxiety. So we have to be careful.
So give us some strategies. What did you do? How did you, because look, now, obviously I know you for a couple of years now, right? Working through the foundation. So I've seen you grow, but when I look at you, right, I don't see that at all. That's the other thing, right? I don't see that at all. I see this really, vibrant, friendly, sweet, confident young lady. No, but you still feel this sometimes, right? So it's like, that's the other distinction, right? Like, just our appearances don't always tell the whole story, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, when I always talk about when somebody, I've never seen this with you, but when somebody reacts negatively sometimes, or is just not as, I don't know, you don't get a great impression from somebody, because they're struggling with something, right? Like they might look real confident and everything on the outside, but the truth is there might be something going on inside, right? So
100%.
Knowing that about you, right? So what have you done? Like, how do you, what strategies, what mindset, like what tools can you share with the audience here, somebody else that might be struggling right now, being bullied, whether it's in person, online, through social media?
Well, before I give the strategies, I want to say that 4 years ago, if you asked me that, like, I'm the first person to take people's opinions into account. Like, whenever someone tells me something about myself, I do take it straight to heart, and I still kind of am that way. So just as a disclaimer, but I will say, and I'll start with the more known strategies, I guess you could say. People always say, let it roll off your back. But sometimes that's literally impossible, to just have someone say a comment to you and you just forget about it the next day. That's not practical, and it's not realistic. But I will say, understanding where the comment came from helped me. And, I wasn't best friends with the people who bullied me for the most part, but I could only imagine that there was something happening in their life, whether that was something at home or just straight up insecurity, or honestly, the most common thing is just immaturity. It really is. People just don't understand. And I was always the tallest kid in my class. I always physically stood out, but I also mentally stood out because I had to mature so much quicker than everybody else, dealing with my dad and having to take care of him, and to see some really, really scary stuff at a young age. So dealing with people who didn't have that maturity level, it felt like bullying a lot. And they might not even know that they're doing it. Some people do, 100%, they have that intention, but a lot of people, it's just immaturity. So for me, like, number one was just realizing this person's got to be pretty jealous or pretty low or pretty immature to say that about you. I have learned to only take the comments to heart from people who I care about, and people who are credible. Like if my professor tells me something, I'm going to take that to heart. If my mom says something to me, or my boyfriend says something to me, or my best friend says something to me, of course I'm going to take it to heart. But some random person in school who I met one time who's immature, like, you have to learn that their opinion weighs a minuscule compared to the people who really care about you. And if you listen to the opinions of people who really care about you, you'll see that that bully is a little bit crazy. Those opinions aren't true. So that's the first thing. But I will say confrontation was something I didn't get for a while. That would be my second thing, is if you feel comfortable to say something, 100% say it. But I will say that there are other ways around it, because some people are scared, especially if it's in person, to say something back. A lot of people run away, and that's what I did until the cyberbullying started. And then I finally got thicker skin and started talking. But in the meantime, whether you're actually physically standing up for yourself or not, my biggest thing, if anything, because those two things everyone's heard, stand up for yourself and don't let it bother you. Yeah, we've heard that. But for me, I used it as power. I used the bullying as literally my fuel to achieve everything that I have achieved thus far and want to achieve. I'm a very competitive person, but even for the people who aren't competitive genuinely, I would say it's kind of a, I'm gonna prove you wrong now. You said that, now watch me, because sometimes that's the only way to get someone to be quiet, is to just show them the truth. And that's what gave me my confidence, was doing that. Like the example I used where people told me I wasn't good enough for that role. I couldn't sing, I couldn't do this and that. I'm currently writing my own album to put out on Apple Music and Spotify. And the album is songs to different people in my life. And so far I've written 3 songs to 3 separate people, and they were all different bullies. And I have written songs to them now that I'm literally going to use as my power for my project, for my art, for my healing, and put it out into the world so people can learn about it and people can be more aware of it. And I'm not saying you got to go join Broadway or write an album or be some celebrity or a lawyer or whatever, but even if it's just a small goal, if someone says something to you that isn't true, show them, no matter how small it is. If someone says that you aren't the greatest at math, show them that you are, because you are. That you have it in you. I've used it as power. And now I will say that I've gained the respect of so many of those people who used to bully me. Like a lot of them comment on my posts now and say like, wow, congratulations. You might even make an acquaintance. I won't say friend, because we can't forget the past, make them stop and stare at you and say, wow, I finally do see that person's worth. I respect them, because everyone has so much worth. Everyone has so much to share in this life, no matter if it's art or sports or being a lawyer or whatever it could be, starting a podcast, starting a show, doing community service, literally anything. Everyone has something. So use it as passion, use it as a benefit to you,
It's beautiful share.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it is. I actually want to chime in. There's a couple things. Number one, you actually identified 4 of the top 10 things, reasons that people bully. And I think this is important to share. When we talk about having home or other outside influences that are affecting their lives and feeling insecure, being immature, and trying to fit in with other people. To your point about now people are recognizing and commenting on your posts, maybe some of those people have matured and realized, hey, you know what, I was actually kind of being a jerk, to Ashley back then, and now I've kind of done my thing. The other thing I wanted to share was, I love how you use the bullying and you flip the switch and you realize that, hey, you know what, instead of running from it, I'm going to run to it, and I'm going to utilize it as my motivation and my inspiration. And if there's anything, I think that message alone should be what our listeners take away from this. Because the other part I was going to share is
Yeah.
I would have never known any of this stuff happened to you just having this short conversation with you, because the level of confidence that you have in yourself. The
Thank you.
other part is the resiliency that you've shown to overcome something that many people don't, and they still struggle with and trying to find a way. You have truly laid a great foundation for a lot of people that are being bullied. And to your point, yeah, a lot of people may not be willing to speak up for themselves because it's not their personality. They don't feel comfortable doing it, or they're afraid of the retaliation that may occur. But
Yeah.
finding another way, and through music is another way. And I meant to tell you, for this is going to be both video and audio, but I'm looking over your shoulder. I'm a drummer, so
Yeah,
I see those
really.
behind. Yeah, I see
Yeah,
those behind you.
I'm trying to teach myself.
Okay, well, I'm self-taught actually. I don't read music. I taught myself
Oh,
to play, and so if you need a drummer for your next song, just reach out. I've laid out a
thank
couple tracks,
you.
send them your way, and it won't sell anything, but at least it'll get used.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, music was always my way of coping. And no matter what you're going through, if it's bullying, anxiety, whether that's an eating disorder or losing somebody, whatever it is, I always suggest turning to what you love if you can, and I know in times of depression, which I've also had my fair share of, it's hard to even get out of bed and do what you love. But I promise that once you're doing it, at least for me, things kind of melt away. Like now I go and perform at community service events, and I post those videos online, and I know my worth now versus what I thought my worth was back then, because I was finally able to turn to something I love, and again, like, use it as fuel and use it as passion. I mean, I always recommend music 100%. Like, I picked up the ukulele during COVID and taught myself 4 chords, and I'm writing a whole album on it. You don't need to be crazy talented to do it. Anyone can if you have the passion. But even if it's art or journaling, or I went on a nature walk today with my friend for us to just talk and clear our minds, whatever it is, that's always a plus, is to turn to things that you love.
I want to piggyback on what Antwaun said, about channeling your energy is such an important thing. And I think that's a huge strategy that you gave there, is like, look, you can focus on the bullying, you can focus on how it makes you feel, or you can decide, I'm going to use this as fuel to prove people wrong, right? And not even prove people wrong, just to do what's best for me. To, like, and I think that's a tremendous lesson. And the other thing, which I don't think we touched on, but it's there. One thing about Gen Z, right? One of the biggest social emotional pieces we need to teach is empathy, right?
Yes.
I think when you can actually look at a bully and take a step back and say to yourself, look, they're doing this because they're struggling. They're not doing this because, look, there are mean people. There are bad people out there. But
Yeah.
I don't think most people are mean or bad. I think most people are good. And I think most people that bully are dealing with something, right? Significant at home, whatever, their friends, their own personal demon, their own self-worth, their own self-confidence. And I think, being able to be the victim of a bully and to pull out that empathy card and be able to view it that way takes tremendous social emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it shows a lot of maturity to be able to turn it around. And that's kind of what I was saying before, is just for 1 second, think about what this person may be going through. They may just be a mean person, but 95% chance that's not the only thing at play, or the thing at play at all. There's something else going on there. And a lot of the times, again, they don't know they're doing it, but a lot of the times they will move past it once they're able to sort out whatever that factor is. And it will stop, or you'll just kind of grow out of it and gain that person's respect. As I was saying, it takes time. That's the thing. Like, I would say I went through bullying for most of elementary school. I mean, that's a different kind because we're very young and kids don't really know what's happening. And definitely for all of middle school. So it does take time, but people will grow up. People will grow out of it, and things will get better. I think it's just important to have the optimism. And I know it's hard when you're sitting in your bedroom sobbing because someone said something about you on social media, to be like, oh, it's okay, I'm going to be so optimistic. That's really hard. But after the fact, maybe even, after you have that breakdown or that panic attack or that hard moment, you can say, I'm going to move past this, and they probably will too one day.
First of all, it's always, and this is just adding on to strategies, right? Because we're talking about bullying and anxiety. You had your group of friends, right? It's so important to know, like, you know what? These are my friends. These are the people. Like, these are the people I need in my corner, and they love me for who I am. They respect me for who I am. And just knowing you have that helps kind of ignore the bullying. Like you said, it's not always easy, but it's important to sometimes, sometimes we get caught up in it, right? Like when it's happening, it's in our head and we're so stuck in it and we go down that rabbit hole and we can't get out of it. But sometimes pulling back, taking a deep breath, taking a 30,000-foot view, right? And be like, you know what? Because all you need is 2 or 3 good friends. You need 1 good friend, really, right?
Yeah.
But you go to 3 good friends, all of a sudden, that bully doesn't have any more power anymore because the people that you love and the people that are in your tribe, your tribe, and that's important. And the other piece is, just think about this too. And I mean, I know this is true, unfortunately, but you're gonna go to college.
Yeah.
That whole high school life, that whole middle, it's in the, like, you're a new person. Like, I remember for me, I got bullied. I dealt with a lot. When I went to college, like, it was so freeing for me because I was like, I didn't go with anybody I knew. I got a brand new, I got myself. I didn't have to fit in. I didn't have to worry about it. I just got to be who I am. And, for me, I flourished in college because I got out of the environment that I wasn't comfortable in, right? That's the other thing to remember for your teen struggling right now, especially if you're like an older teen, you're in 11th, 12th grade, like, your life's going to change in a year or two.
100%.
You're going to be either in college or at a job or at a trade school or doing something, right, away from that environment, and you're going to get a fresh start anyway. And that's the whole thing with life. Life's full of fresh starts, right? This is my third career, right? Fresh starts. And so when you're worrying about the bullying and you're thinking about your reputation and how people view me, just remember, like, in the scheme of life, it's this much impact on your whole life. And if you can adopt that mindset and realize that, it really just it takes away the power and the impact of what a bully can do or say to you.
I wish I could go talk to my younger self and tell her, and tell her that, because when you're in the heat of, say, middle school, you're in 7th or 8th grade, it feels like it's never going to end. And a lot of times, with how the school districts are formed, you move up to high school with those same people and you're like, oh my God, I have to deal with these people for another 4 years. It can feel scary, but I wish I would pay any amount of money to go back and tell my younger self that it is going to get better. Because, whenever we're in the moment, it feels like the biggest deal and it feels like your entire life is falling apart. But then when you look back on it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. That wasn't really that much. That helped me grow, and piggybacking on what you said, Keith, with friends, your friends are also a resource because they're probably going through the same thing you are at one point or another, or have gone through it, or know someone who've gone through it. And they're also there to stand up for you in your corner. If you're not one to speak out, your friends might be willing to. They certainly don't have to. That doesn't make them any less of a friend. But whether they're speaking out to you and just helping you find your confidence, or speaking to that bully, whatever it is, I wish I could go back to my younger friends and thank them for what they did for me. Even if they're not my best friends now, they were a point in time where they really, really did help me get through it.
One other thing, Antwaun, I'm sure you have some questions. Like, the other thing is that whole group dynamic, right? Like, you ever notice people are very good in groups, but you get some of those people who are, they'll bully as a group, right? But then you get that person alone and they're not with that group. And all of a sudden they're very weak because they're bullying too. And I think that, sometimes, like, if you're going to approach somebody who's bullying you, you want to have a conversation with a bully. That's the perfect time. Like, if obviously every scenario is different, but if it's a group of kids that are bullying you, finding that moment, in the lunchroom, outside of school, whatever, to approach that person and be like, so why do you treat me like that? Because I notice you're only like that when you're in the group.
Peer pressure is a huge thing nowadays. People act according to how everybody wants them to act. And that will carry on into college with drinking and drugs and whatever the case. It's almost human nature to go along with the pack and go along with the tide, per se. People don't like to feel different. People don't like to be an outsider. That's what I spent my whole life trying to fix about myself. I didn't want to be the different one. I didn't want to be the one who can't see out of my right eye. I wear a prosthetic. I didn't want to be the one that was told I have a lazy eye every 5 seconds. I didn't want to be the taller one, the bigger girl, the more mature one, whatever it was. I always wanted to be just like everybody else. But something that I've learned, especially when going to college, is that being different than everybody else is so beautiful. And I would say, like, honestly, my advice to a bully who's doing it because of peer pressure is that different is beautiful, and you shouldn't go along with the tide, especially if that group is doing something bad. In any case, I think that being different is the best way to be. And in college, you'll see people with so many different styles, and whether that's hair or personality or ear piercings or clothing or just whatever it is, and interests and how many different majors there are. Like, there's no reason to blend in. So the people who bully out of peer pressure, I wish they would step out of the box a little bit and say that it's okay not to be a part of a crowd, because in life, that's how it's going to end up being.
So I wanted to shift back to middle school, high school for a second, because
Sure.
I have a take on administration, faculty, teachers' role when it comes to bullying. I mean, as a coach and mentor, I coach kids in middle school, and I train high school kids, and I have a lot of conversations with them about every aspect of their lives, and bullying is part of those conversations. And one
Yeah.
of the things that always comes up, and because I like to put the responsibility back on the adults to be a part of the solution, because if they're not part of the solution, guess what? They're part of the problem. So
Yeah.
that's why I was asking you earlier about, did you feel comfortable talking to teachers about it?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, if any player that I coach has a problem on my team, they absolutely come to me because they know I'm going to resolve it, and not just, go after the person that's doing it. We're going to have a discussion about it, talk about the pros and cons and the negativities and how it affects everybody else. So, having said all that, do you feel as though it would be a better process if teachers were more part of the solution, if kids felt more comfortable going to them if they had an issue with bullying?
I do think so. I think that adults in general are the root of everything, because we were all raised by somebody, whether that's a birth parent or another family member, an adopted parent. So I'll get to the teachers in a sec, but I want to start just with adults in general. They should definitely be more a part of it, because, I've had my mom call up parents of kids recently, like not within a year, but like early high school, calling parents of people, friends of mine, who all of a sudden decided that bullying me was a good idea. And the parents encouraged the kids to continue what they were doing, stood up for what the kids were doing. I know that if I ever bullied someone, which I never would, but if I did and my mom found out, she would walk me to that person's house and make me apologize and give a fruit basket or something. Like, she would really make sure. And not only would she do that, she would make sure that I never did it again, and I knew why it was wrong. So adults are a huge part of the solution. They're also a part of the problem. So I think we need to get more adults to be a part of that solution. And going to teachers, in my story, I did feel comfortable going to people. I felt more comfortable going to teachers in my new school than I did in my old school. I'll say that. But I think teachers need to be more aware of what's happening, because it's right in front of them. It's harder with the cyberbullying because teachers really don't follow their students on social media, and that's more of a high school thing. But I think especially in middle school, as you were saying, coaching middle school, teachers need to be in the loop, checking in with their students, and being that safe space for them. Because, if bullies are having a problem and they have no one to go to about that problem, they will take it out on the people that they are bullying. But say teachers were there for everybody, victims and bullies alike, I feel like there would be less, because bullies would feel more accepted, safer, and they wouldn't take their home life problems or insecurities out on anybody else if teachers were more understanding. Because nowadays, if someone goes up to a teacher and says, hey, there's something, I'm feeling insecure, a good teacher will help them, but some teachers try to brush it off. And, we got to get more active with that, because adults are the example, especially when you're talking about bullying in a younger setting. And, just to tie that all together, you usually don't go into like senior year of high school and all of a sudden start bullying someone. A lot of the times you do it since a younger age because that's when your brain is really developing, and that's just kind of what happens. So stopping it before it gets worse, that's an adult's job. And a teacher's job is someone whose job is literally to work with children, not just to teach them education, but to teach them what's morally right and wrong.
Well, I am glad you said that because believe it or not, I had an incident happen, literally happened this morning, and it
Wow.
ties into what you just talked about. So I'm going to share it. So I got a phone call from a parent who monitoring her son's phone because the team has a separate chat from the one we have as a team.
Mhm.
And it turns out that there's some inappropriate conversations going on and talking about other players. So of
Mhm.
course she wants to bring it to my attention. She's had a conversation with other parents. Well, what's great about that, the parent felt comfortable enough to reach out to me because they know, number one, I'm going to address it, but it's always about how you address it. So
Yes.
it's not just going, hey, your mom called me and said X, Y, Z, because all that does is singles that kid out. And all that's going to do is perpetuate more bullying. So
Yeah.
it's all about how you handle the situation. So I got the information today. Guess what? I got 2 days to figure out how I'm going to handle it, but I want to handle it in a way that it is a life learning lesson, as opposed to singling out, say, hey, I don't want this going on anymore. That does nothing. There
Yeah.
has to be a solution to it. So the solution I'm going to come up with, and kids will tell you, it'll be one that there will be no more of that after I address it, because I think that's important. But I say that just because I wanted just to reinforce what you're talking about as far as adults being part of the solution. A lot of teachers, unfortunately, because they're so stressed out because of what's happened over the last couple of years with COVID and with the hybrid teaching and things of that nature, a lot of people getting out of teaching. That
Mhm.
doesn't excuse the fact that if you sign a dotted line and you say you're going to teach the next generation of leaders, it's not just about lessons, it's about those individual students and making
Yeah.
sure that their experience is one that's positive both in the classroom and every aspect of their school experience.
Yeah, it's about creating, as I said, that safe space, and something that we see a lot, even in the movie world, I will say, but it's definitely happened in real life. Is a parent calls a teacher, especially within the younger grades, and says, "Oh, my child's being bullied," and the teacher will say something to the effect of, "They're just kids, they'll get over it," and brushes it off. That's not your job as a teacher, is to say they're just kids and brush it off. Your job is to figure out why it's happening, because it's not something that a kid should really be doing. Kids run around at recess and play and do all sorts of stuff, but bullying should not be one of them. So it's your job as an educator, Antwaun, just like you said, when you make that commitment, you're not just there for a textbook or, from that 9 to 3 day, you're there as a mentor and a role model and a supportive figure, for that child, to show them what is right. And by enabling it, that certainly doesn't show them what's right.
Yeah.
Amen, sister. Hallelujah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I want to share something because Antwaun, you could probably attest to this. Actually, I think part of the issue too is a lot of parents vicariously are living through their kids, right?
Yeah.
So they make decisions or they do things because, like if your kid screws up, they look at that as, oh, I'm a bad parent. You're not, but that's how it's viewed, right? So a lot of teachers, it's like, and I'm not defending it. I'm just
No, yeah.
I'm sharing, I think, what some of the concerns are. But then there's a solution for it. Is you get that teacher who's like, I could call this parent and let them know what's going on, but then the parent's going to call the principal and tell them that I called, and now I'm going to have to deal with it, right? Like it becomes like a vicious cycle.
Mhm.
Not that that's right, but I truly think the issue is the training. I think from the administration down, there has to be proper training, and you have to make these teachers feel confident that if they see something, they can say something and not have to worry that it's going to impact their job or their reputation because they're speaking up. Because unfortunately, we know how this world works, right? We like to think everything's equal and everybody's on equal footing, but it's not always true, right? There's people
Right.
with pull and there's people with connections. And, I think it's really important that administration, has a clear plan about how it's great. Oh, I'm going to bring in a speaker about bullying. Oh, we're an anti-bullying school. Well, what are you doing about it? I mean, it's great
Right.
to say that, but what are you actually doing when it happens?
Yeah.
So one thing, which I can't share in detail yet, but one way I'm working on something But one of the ways to fix this is to have direct communication between the teacher and the students on a daily basis, where they can kind of understand how a student's feeling. And if a student is having a rough couple of days, the teacher's aware of it and can approach that kid and be like, hey, what's going on, right? That could be the potential bully right there. And now you got to that kid, you know, you avoid a bullying situation, you avoid a school shooting, you avoid a suicide. Like there's got to be more of it's got to be more of a social emotional connection between the teacher and the students, not just, hey, we got to teach this subject, but got to understand the student on a whole, not just who they are academically, but who they are as a person, because everybody's different. And if we can find some mechanism, which I have in the back of my head, can bridge that gap, I think there's so much we can do to make this a better way to manage it. And I think you could see so much change in what goes on in school. So I'm not defending teachers. I'm just saying.
No, but there's a reason for everything.
As an educator, there's a lot of other external influences, you know, because think about it. Teachers, like, I got a family to feed. I got to do my job. I can't, you know, it's like, there's so much other stuff. But if we create that safe environment, you know, the school has to not just say, I'm an anti-bully school. We're an anti-bully school, and here's, you know, there's a plan for a fire drills. There's a plan for a school shooting, right? There needs to be a plan for bullying.
100%. And, you know, both schools that I went to, both high schools, claimed to be anti-bullying schools, but there was clearly only a policy in the one that I transferred to, and I clearly saw that policy. The minute anything on social media was even said, the schools, you know, and I will say I transferred from a public to a private school, but regardless of whether it's public or private, there was just such a difference. And at my original school, if things happened on social media, let's say, teachers said, that's not a part of this school. That's their social media accounts outside of school. Whereas at my new school, they said, your social media account is a reflection of you. You go to this school, therefore it's relevant. So they were able to take into account the cyberbullying as well. And they had rock hard policies in place. And I saw them executed multiple times. And that's comforting to see. But I agree. It definitely starts with administration. And I think getting it into educators' training, you know how you have to do training like Title IX training for sexual assault and training for drugs and alcohol abuse and things. Let's get some mental health training into the educators' peripheral, you know, area. Let's get it to them, access to them, you know, not tell them go find it yourself. Let's give it to them, because finding the signs of bullying is just as important as fixing it, but also knowing what to do when it happens is really important, because what if it's the teacher's first time dealing with that certain situation? Let's get them some resources, you know?
The bully may never become the bully.
Yeah.
Somebody got to them. We need to have a standard in schools. Administrators can be like, okay, I can do this. I can enforce this. Great. Let me bring it to my team. Everybody's got to buy into this. If this is just like a nebulous idea, you know, we're just going to say the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
It really encompasses everything that we're ultimately saying right now. Is it's incumbent upon the teachers to recognize that if I have the same students every day for an entire year or an entire semester, every day that they come in the classroom, I know for the team I coach, I can look at a kid and tell if he's tuned in or not tuned in.
Yeah.
And if they're not, I pull them aside. Hey, is everything okay? And believe it or not, by doing that, guess what's happening? Number one, you're strengthening your relationship with that student.
Yeah.
Number two, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, Mr. Thompson cares about me. So if something goes wrong, I feel comfortable enough to go to him. Now, not only in my role as a teacher is I want you to be the best student you can be. That means your entire experience has to be positive. And if I recognize that, hey, you're not tuned in this particular day, or you seem like you're depressed or just disconnected, it is my responsibility, because you're not going to learn anything if you're not engaged. Yeah. And I realize there's a lot of kids, but you know, it only takes 10 seconds to acknowledge a child and let them know that you care. And that's all you have to do. If you do that every day, that's, 10 seconds, right? That's a minute a week. But guess what? That minute makes all the difference in the world. And I know my math, I'm off 10 seconds. I realize that, but I'm just rounding up here.
Oh, I get it. It really does make the biggest difference. And like Keith said, it can stop a potential situation from even starting, but it can also help a situation. If you ask someone who's being bullied if they're okay, it shows that someone cares. Because when you're being bullied, you don't feel like anybody cares. You feel almost worthless in a sense, especially when you have these rude comments being made to you. So whether it's an adult or a child, to have anyone come up to you and say, hey, are you okay? That could be the difference between life and death, and you would never even know, because just knowing that even one person cares is really powerful stuff. And I know firsthand because it's happened to me. And I've had someone ask if I'm okay, and I just break down crying because, no, I'm going through such a hard time, but thank you for caring. It has touched me so much.
I'm going to have a guest on here pretty soon that has gone through some similar things that you have. And the relationship we developed was because I did just what you just said. And that was the start of a 6-year relationship that's built,
Wow.
and it's gotten stronger and stronger. And it was because of what you just said, because you always showed that you care every time you saw me. And you can tell when I'm not myself, and you always inquire. And even when I'm not around, you'll reach out. That's the biggest difference between, to your point, Keith, about whether you can prevent bullying or you can actually end it, just by having that support system. And I just feel like teachers, faculty, administrators need to realize that it's not all about testing and all these things like that. You're impacting lives, not
Right.
just education. And so I just applaud you for all that you've overcome. Just the confidence that you exude is just amazing. And I think it's a testament to what you've gone through. I mean, with your father as well. I mean, believe it or not, that process actually strengthened you, I believe, and it's gotten you to where you are today. Because at such a young age, that's a lot to take on, and a lot of young people don't overcome that, and you've overcome that. And that speaks volumes to your resolve and your resiliency. And I know that Keith will agree with me that we're honored to have you here as not just as our first guest, but as a guest. And I'm sure we'll have you back on, because there's so much more. You're just a wealth of knowledge, we can tell, and there's a lot more that you can share. And Keith, if you're good with it, I'm going to fire off a couple questions that we're going to be asking our guests, unless you want to chime in before I get to that.
You can. I just have one quick thing. I just want to share this with all the teens listening to this. Ask for help. Identify that one adult, if it's not your parent, outside of school, that you could trust. It could be a teacher. It could be a coach. It could be your if you do martial arts, it could be your sensei, right? Just identify that person that you trust. Ask for help. If you're struggling with something, don't be afraid to ask for help. There's nobody that doesn't want to help, but if we don't know that you need help, you can't be helped, right? So don't be afraid to ask for help. Find that person and ask them, because 9 out of 10 times, more than 9 out of 10 times, they're gonna be there for you, and it can change the whole trajectory of your life with that one conversation. So
Yeah, don't be scared, because what you're going through is scary, but and it would be scary to ask someone, but what you're going through is worse. It's more terrifying than anything. So don't be afraid to speak out about it to someone you trust. I agree.
Yeah, and I'll take that one step further. If you can't find anybody to reach out to, you definitely can reach out to me. And I know you can reach out to Keith as well, because that's what we're here for, to help you. So nobody can say there's nobody to reach out to, because we'll be just an email and a phone call away. All right, Miss Ashley, are you ready for the TeenSpeak questionnaire?
I'm ready. Here we go. All right.
All righty. Number one, who is your biggest influence and why?
My biggest influence. Okay, I have 2 answers. I'll start with the first one, my mother, obviously. She is the most courageous person, the most passionate person I have ever met in my life. And I say that about my father as well. He was a warrior to fight through what he did. But my mother was also that warrior to fight with him. And watching a loved one suffer is so hard. Watching your husband pass on and watching your child go through all that I went through, I could only imagine what it was like for her. And she was still somehow able to put on a smile and get me to acting class every day while she was taking care of my sick father. I see myself in her physically and mentally. And I have no words for how much she has truly taught me, and she's made me who I am, because if I turn out exactly like her, I would be more than happy, because she really is an earth angel. So I'll say my mom, and as a more celebrity jokey answer, 100% Taylor Swift. She has definitely influenced me musically, not only my style of music, but the messages, because actually Taylor was bullied as well for being the tall one, for being different. And she helped me speak out about my struggles through music. So not only do I love her songs, but I love her message as a human, and she has definitely touched my heart 100%.
Yeah. Well, I think you just answered number 2, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What is your biggest strength, and how do you utilize it as a superpower?
Wow. I would say that the determination is big in me. I would say there's like a fire in my heart somehow to do what I'm passionate about. Once I get an idea in my head, I know for a fact that I want to do it, no matter how hard it is. Once I have a challenge that I've set my mind to, I'm going to do it. Being determined, even when things get really, really rocky, is really hard. There was a point during my first semester where I was in a bit of a low place because it was such a transition and my grades were slipping. But I said, you set a goal for yourself at the beginning of this semester, and you set a goal for yourself years and years ago when you knew you wanted to be a doctor. And no matter what you're going through, don't let this get in the way of your goal. Fight through it. Just the pure fire and passion and determination for what you do. It has saved me millions and millions of times, and it's something that I think I always had, but it's something that's grown in me.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, I'm going to ask you, man, you didn't slip her these questions before, because she's answered the next question before I get to it.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, you're good. Oh, you're good. No, you're good.
Thanks.
I'm kidding.
Our mom is the best. I love your mom. And
She's
when you brought up the Taylor Swift, I didn't say it before, but as you were sharing about you're writing your stories, I'm like, oh, she's using the Taylor Swift model. Sure.
All right. So the next one is, what is your biggest failure and lesson you learned from it? And you just laid out one, so I don't know if there's another, but that was a great example.
Yeah, well, I want to say first, I think that every failure is a lesson. Every mistake we make is a learning experience. But there were a lot of times where I felt that I wasn't giving 100% because of the things I was going through. When you have a sick father, it's hard to focus on your academics, although I thank God that I did well and that I'm on track for the goals that I'm on track to reach. But there were a lot of times that I was hard on myself. So almost in a way, my biggest mistake was how hard I was on myself for the mistakes that I have made, if that makes sense. If I could go back, I would do it different. I wouldn't be so hard on myself because, and talking about bullying, I was bullied by so many other people, but I didn't even realize that I was bullying myself just by telling myself all negative things and, just those irrational thoughts. We all have them. And I didn't realize how much I was hurting myself. So I think that's kind of where I went wrong in school, and still have those mistakes to this day where I'm really, really hard on myself. So I would definitely do it different, but it taught me a lot. It taught me about how much your opinion on yourself really does matter versus others' opinions. And that's also what helped me get through the bullying, is realizing that my opinion's really the only one that can affect how I live my life.
Yeah, I was going to say that's I love that you realized you were bullying yourself. I mean, that's huge to make that declaration going through the process. And sometimes that's that wake up. Would you want to add, Keith?
No, similar. I was just going to say, like, our internal dialogue literally dictate what our external life looks like.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to love yourself before you love others, and you've got to be comfortable with who you are despite your flaws, and know what your strengths are. And because if you're feeling it good from within, and you have this good internal dialogue, it's much easier to navigate the external things that are thrown at you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I agree.
Oh, 100%. All right, Miss Ashley, one final question. This
All
is
right.
kind of a fun one. So yeah, I hope you'll enjoy this one.
Here we
If
go.
if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Okay.
Any superpower.
I always had a very creative mind. This is kind of basic, but I would control water because when I was little, well, I always loved to swim. I learned to swim when I was like, I don't know, like a year old or something. I was in the water since forever. And when I was little, I thought I was a mermaid. I loved, sea creatures. I loved the water. I loved the pool and the beach and all that. Like I was always a big swimmer. So I would totally do water control. I think that's pretty cool and pretty fun just to be able to have like water bubbles flying everywhere. And there was this show, oh my God, what was it called? H2O something with all the mermaids. And I was like, I want to be them. So that's what I would do.
Control water.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What would
All
you
right.
guys have as your superpower?
Oh man, mine is kind of different, but I love it because I would have the power to make everybody love each other.
Oh, well, of course I would do that over water control. Yeah, I love that.
No, that's mine. That really is mine. It really is.
Great.
What about you?
Mine would be
Keith?
similar. Whoever I touch becomes kinder.
Yeah.
Well, now mine just seems so random. I would 100% pick those over water control. But if we're talking,
Listen, you would have had the best answer.
stereotypical superpower, that. But yeah.
Well, you would have had the best answer if you hadn't asked me. So you asked me, you would have left here with the best answer.
I guess I had to. I was curious.
Yeah, no, that's all good. Actually, this has been absolutely amazing. The
Thank
wealth
you.
of experience, knowledge that you shared is going to be beneficial and advantageous to a lot of young people. And I hope those that are listening realize the impact of the strategies that you've used. And a lot of them are very simple. And I think one of them is believing in yourself and being that what you can be, and you can overcome anything. So for me personally, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and speak with Keith and I.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having me. It's been such an honor, and I'm always looking for an opportunity to just tell anyone, I'll say to anyone who's listening, just know that no matter what you're going through, in this case bullying, but anything, that you are so loved by someone out there. And that's all that matters. But you have to love yourself, and that comes with time. But just know that you are loved and you do have the potential to do amazing things, and you're already doing amazing things. Just standing here, you got out of bed today. That's an amazing thing, So anytime I could share my message. So I appreciate you guys having me on and letting me do that today.
Well, we're going to have you back, and hopefully next time we have you back, we're going to have you perform one of your songs for us.
Yes. Oh, I would love that.
So,
Absolutely.
And look, I just want to say this on a personal note, Ashley, because I've known you for a few years now. Like, honored to be on your podcast, to know the work you're doing with the foundation, for youth mental health, and to just make the world a better place. You're a beautiful person, and I'm honored to know you, and I'm so glad that you got to be on the podcast, and you got to be our first guest, which is really cool.
Thank you, guys. I mean, it was an honor. You guys are doing incredible things too, and I just major props and all the love in the world for it, because we need more people like you guys. We really do.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that.
Well, Ashley, go out there and keep making impact and keep inspiring Gen Z, because you guys are going to change the world.
I will. I'll try my absolute best.
Sure. And it's not all on you, right? It's just you being you. Just keep being you. We hope you get value out of this. We hope the guests that we bring on, you see other teenagers dealing with similar things, take these strategies, really listen to what they're saying and utilize it in your life, so you can kind of meet your true north, meet your true potential, and be at your best self, so you can be happy. From Coach T and me, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
If you are looking for a youth empowerment and leadership coach that can help your teenager find their true north through education, support, and inspiration, you need look no further. You can reach Coach Keith Senzer through his website, shiftyourpower.com. Coach T can be reached through his website as well, coachtscorner.com.